Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. My name is Steve Abraham. I'm a professor in the College of Business and Entrepreneurship. And I want to talk to you a little bit about an assignment I created that requires the students to use AI. Basically, this came out of 2 years ago, I guess it was. I did the AI fellowship that the college provided that John ran, John and Stephanie, and I participated in that. And as part of the outcomes of that, I had to develop an AI assignment. It's not really an assignment. Well, you'll see how it's an assignment, but I'll explain that in a minute. First, I should start by explaining that I did this for MBA 538, which is an MBA Human Resource Management course. And I guess the first thing that I should do is explain what my goals are for MBA 5 for Human Resource Management at the MBA level. Truthfully, human resource management is not exactly like nuclear physics or econometrics or something really, and it's pretty basic stuff. So what my ultimate goal was for students taking the course to think critically about the issues in HR. I mean, anybody can pretty much understand what a performance appraisal is or how organizations hire people or how organizations pay people. But I wanted them to think about critical issues that maybe aren't so obvious, but some of the things that some of the literature talks about. So what I did was actually I created a course, and I've done this for a while. I did this about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I created a course that's all discussion based. There are no assignments, there are no exams. It is all basically students responding to discussion questions that basically deal with the critical issues in HR. And an example, there are 25 discussion questions, but here's an example of one of the discussion questions I use. Let's talk about the interview. Clearly, the most organizations do interviews, but they are not valid predictors at all. Even if everything is done to maximize the validity of the interview, there are more valid predictors. There are better ways to hire people that figure out what's going to be a good employee. So given all that information, I just want people to share their thoughts on the interview. Why don't organizations do more to improve their validity? Why do organizations continue to use the interview when there are more valid predictors? I wanted them to discuss some of the literature that deals with that. Well, before this, again, this question, along with 24 other questions, has been part of my course for 5 or 6 years. Now, what I did previously was I had a how you will be evaluated statement. And basically, the prior how you will be evaluated statement kind of looked like this. And this, by the way, full confession, I am not great with PowerPoint, so it was difficult for me to get all of my Word documents into a PowerPoint. This is kind of a shortened version of the how you will be evaluated question. For before the AI assignment, the students had to take, for each question, they had to provide one original post and respond to two other people's posts. Again, this was the old version. And the original how you'll be evaluated statement said, as it says here, your post should provide information that clarifies and or explains what's in the text. So first, I wanted them to discuss the text. I wanted to make sure they read the text. So I wanted them to read the text and talk about what's in the text. And then they needed to find some additional research to that would explain, clarify what's in the test. So the one question for the how you'll be evaluated was You should use additional external sources to find information related to your topic, and your post should discuss thoroughly the information you find. In other words, they had to use library sources, use Google, whatever, to find research articles, to find Business Week, Newsweek, any articles. They had to find external sources and discuss those sources. And then in their response, you can see the requirements for responses. Well, previously, I had an AI statement because again, this is before the course. It was an AI course, so this is basically what my AI statement had been. I do not object to the use of AI in the course. You may not simply submit a question prompt to AI and then copy and paste the answer into Brightspace as your contribution. Therefore, if you submit a question to AI, you must do the following. Take the response generated by AI and add to that response with your own experiences and/or with material from the text. In addition, I would like you to use the citations generated by AI, visit those citations, and supplement the response generated by AI with material that you find in your original source. Finally, I ask that you paste and include a table or list of prompts that you gave to AI, and the same thing for the response. Well, I'm sure you can imagine what happened. I would get responses from students citing articles that did not exist whatsoever. I'm really scared, but among us, I am really scared at some point we have to know that AI is going to be able to come up with a way to generate only citations that exist. And if and when it does, I'm in trouble because there's no way that I'm going to be able to ensure that my students have read those sources. But so what happened in the past? Some students, I will be honest, some students really did do what I said here. If they put a prompt into AI, they really did read the sources. If they found that a source did not exist, they would put the prompt into AI again and look for valid, legitimate sources, and then they would discuss their own perspectives. Many people did not. Many people just, copied and pasted AI's response into their response, made it like it was their own words. But they would do things, they would say, as Smith and Jones say, blah, 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 blah. And then they would cite Smith and Jones at the bottom of their response. But then I would click on Smith and Jones. Smith and Jones didn't exist. So obviously they did not read Smith and Jones, and they did not even bother to read the prompt that AI had generated for them. So it was just very difficult for me. I had, full disclosure, I had a lot of people failing the course in the past because they were just they were plagiarizing. Basically, they were making up citations that did not exist. So once I saw about this AI fellowship, and once I thought about the idea of coming up with an AI assignment, I thought, what a great opportunity for me to merge them. Now not only could they use AI, but now they would be required to use AI. So I guess I should show you. So this is my new assignment. This was the AI assignment. It's assignment, but it's new. It's new instructions for the discussions. Okay, and these are the step-by-step instructions. Read the text. Those are the 6. Read the text. Use AI for your research. Now, no longer am I allowing them to use AI, but I'm actually asking them to use AI. And if I can deviate for a moment, this allowed me to incorporate another objective into my course. Not only would students be thinking critically about AI and not only not only would students be thinking critically about issues in HRM, but now they would have the opportunity to practice with AI. And that, I thought, we all know how important AI is becoming in the world. So in addition to getting them to think critically about issues in HRM, now I would require them to interact with AI, and this would have the additional benefit of getting them to become literate with AI, to get to know how to use it. So again, going back to the instructions, they had to read the text. They did not want this to be a substitute for text. I wanted them to read the text. Then to use AI for research. And I wanted them to use a free AI tool to find articles that address the question. Then answer the question. Was the third of the step-by-step instructions. Fourth, analyze the information, discuss what they had learned from the AI research, and how did the research that they found support, contradict, add to the text. Finally, and perhaps number 5 is the most important of the objectives, I wanted them to evaluate the AI output, reflect on the quality of the AI suggestions. Did AI provide helpful information, credible content? Were there issues such as misinformation, lack of depth? And then finally, they had to cite their sources. And on the next page is my grading rubric, because again, as you're going to tell us, then I guess in the next section, I thought it was important to let them know what they would and would not get points, and this way, and I'm sure you'll talk about this. The advantage of this is, now when I graded a student's discussion question, if a student did not earn full points for the discussion question, I could explain, okay, you did not earn full points because you did not critically evaluate the accuracy, credibility, and limitation of the AI sources. So I could point out that that's why the student lost the points. So again, this is my grading rubric, and of course, this grading rubric relates back to the step-by-step instructions. Again, this is a Tilt-generated grading rubric. It was John and Stephanie who came up with the idea of coming up with the Tilt assignment and the rubric. And so again, they had to clearly explain the concept in their own words. That's a pretty straightforward one. Just, read the text. Almost everybody earns that first point. And most people earn the second point as well. Discuss what the textbook or assigned reading, although some people don't. There were a lot of people who, well, I didn't think I needed to read the text, but they had to discuss, and they would get 1 point for discussing what the text says about the topic. Then using AI to find 2 credible sources and integrate those insights respectively. Integrate those assignments effectively. Again, most people did this. Some people would find sites, would provide citations of things that don't exist. Then critically evaluate the accuracy, reliability, and limitations of the AI sources. And then again, to each question, by the way, is worth 7 points. Each response is worth 3 points. The 2-point, if you will, discussed how the AI information sources supports, enhances, or challenges the course material. And finally, the last one, well organized grading. I guess the final thing, and I don't have really a slide on this, what has been the output? Well, as I'm sure it's been mixed. But I will tell you that comparing this version with this prior version that I had back here, much more accurate citations with AI. I still even I used it for the first time last fall. I still got last fall some people providing citations to things that don't exist, but in the past where I got probably 70% of my students providing, or at least 50% providing inaccurate, you know, AI citations generated by AI without acknowledging it. I would say last fall, I actually had about 50 students. Two of them clearly did not follow the instructions and did not do this. And the vast majority, and many of them sent me emails afterwards thanking me for exposing them to AI, and many of them in their discussion responses when they, critically evaluated the accuracy and the reliability of the AI, but acknowledged I had to prompt this question to AI probably 6 or 7 times because I kept on getting citations that didn't exist, or I kept on getting citations um, that were outdated or didn't really answer the question. So overall, would I say that it was effective? Absolutely. Was it perfect? Of course not, but I don't think it ever will be perfect. But basically, that's just what I wanted to share with you is again, and going back to what I said originally, AI is here. We're not going to be able to do anything. There's no way we can prevent students from using AI. And I want my students to be, again, I heard this statement 1,000 times today. I'll use it again myself. AI is a tool, but I want them to recognize what's valid about AI, what works, what doesn't work, how they can evaluate. I want them also to understand and see how AI makes mistakes and how and why it's important to give it appropriate prompts and why it's important to critically evaluate those prompts and then follow up. So that's basically what I said. I don't know if any of you have any questions. I don't know if the people online have any questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions online, just unmute or type something in chat.
I'm glad people are like you are talking about this because I had these written assignments in freshman biology lab where they have to write a paper based on a project that they did. And then I would have that situation where they would be citing things, they would say author name and then the year, and then you go to the references and then it's not there, or something along those lines. And I wasn't sure if basically they just didn't write it down. They were just too lazy to write the full citation because there's a lot of technical information that they have to put in there, the names of the authors, and sometimes if it's not, the authors' names are long or there's multiple authors, and then the title is long, the journal and the volume and the issue and all this stuff, and then maybe they just don't want to do that. And I thought maybe that's what happening, but maybe they're just getting that from AI and it's not a real source. No, I'm glad people mentioned that because I didn't think of that before.
I don't know to what extent you've noticed it, but AI just does provide a lot of things that and John, maybe I mentioned this before when you were out of the room. I really fear the day that at some point, do you think AI ever will get to the point where all of the citations that it generates are accurate?
I have not had an incorrect citation in about 7 or 8 months from AI, but I have the paid version, and there's a big difference between the paid and the free version. Hallucinations are much less common today, even with the free version, but they still do exist with that. But if they start using Gemini more and start using the deep thinking modes or the thinking modes,
Gemini,
we're going to see, if students start using that more, we're going to see a lot less hallucinations. Mostly they're using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT in the free version does hallucinate, especially at peak times for exams and papers and things.
you think the ones that basically that Gemini generally tends not to, especially the beta version?
It's a bit less likely, and it's going to keep becoming less likely. Yeah. It's going to be a challenge. It is a challenge now.
That was what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let me stop the recording. Okay, we're going to exit from here and we'll be back in just a few minutes. But first, stop the screen share.
Maybe if AI could generate fictitious commercials that you could play in the meantime.
Actually,
It was actually.
I did a workshop demonstrating that about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I do have an account on one of the things that will generate avatars and videos and things. One of the things that was requested I gotta stop the recording, sorry. Was to, someone said, well,